Thank you for listening to Creative Control, a listener-funded podcast. If you would like to help and support Creative Control and keep this podcast going, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control and make a monthly flexible donation today. Terry Fallis is an award-winning novelist based in Toronto, Ontario, the author of 7 highly acclaimed comedic and satiric books. His latest is called Albatross and tells the surreal story of a young man whose physical proportions make him the best golfer in the world, even though he's really an aspiring writer who has no interest in golf whatsoever. Published in August of 2019 by McClelland and Stewart, Albatross brings Fallis to events like the Eden Mills Writers Festival this September, among other literary gatherings, and he and I recently met in Toronto for a talk about his trajectory as a political operative, media consultant, and author, and how such things inform his works, including the heartfelt and action-packed Albatross. With the support of listeners like you who subscribe to this podcast and spread the word about it, and make flexible monthly donations at patreon.com/Creative Control, plus in-kind support from CFRU 93.3 FM, Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, and Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton. This is the 490th episode of Creative Control, featuring the very talented Terry Fallis, with your host, me, Vish Khanna.
Gonna go out and play some golf, yeah, I'm gonna go out and play some golf. My golf bag's full of the latest stuff. I'm gonna go out and play some golf. My putter alone was $1,000. I'm gonna go out and suck it golf.
Hi, Terry. How are you?
Hi, Vish.
Nice to be... Wait, I was going to say it's nice to be here, but where are we? You invited me to Toronto. I'm here to meet with you, but where are we exactly?
We are in my day job office at the corner of Yonge and St. Clair.
Wow, it's a lovely view here. What is it you do in your day job office?
I still work in the communications consulting agency that I co-founded 23 years ago.
Oh, congratulations. 23 years ago. What do you do here exactly? What does that mean?
Well, we're a social media digital communications agency, so we do everything from help organizations understand the emerging world of social and digital media. We may shoot some video, we may build a website, and we also are into digital public engagement. We've built a digital public engagement platform that organizations can use to consult with various audiences and share information and all sorts of things like that.
That sounds interesting.
It is.
You still, 23 years, you're still into it.
Still into it, yes. Writing novels is difficult to earn a living in this country, writing novels alone.
Right. How many novels have you written now?
This is number 7.
Number 7. Okay. So you've had to keep a day job, even though you're one of our more, to me, you're one of our more celebrated. I was going to say successful, but then you just underplayed it by saying, well, I got to keep a day job. But you are pretty successful.
Well, that's good of you to say. I love it that it isn't really... the remunerative success is less important to me than just being able to write and having a few people read them and say they enjoy them. So I'm very happy. But one day, maybe I'll be a full-time writer. But there aren't many of us in Canada who can do that.
So do the two things intersect in any way? Does your job inform your writing? Does your writing inform your job?
I think it does. Occasionally, my experience and perhaps expertise from my day job seeps into the background of my novels. I mean, social media often plays a role in some of my novels, and it's really out of laziness that I can do that, because I don't love doing the research for novels, so I tend to plumb the depths of my own experiences and knowledge, such as it is, and they play out in my novels often.
Okay, so you have your latest novel is Albatross. I'm staring at a copy.
Yes, hot off the presses. It's not in stores yet, but this is the only copy I have. I got it yesterday.
Congratulations, first
Thank
of
you.
all. I mean, this is I talked to lots of musicians. I talked to lots of novelists and comedians. Everyone's putting a lot of work into the stuff that we consume. But this novel business always blows my mind. I mean, how many years did you spend writing this book? Did it take a while?
It was about, I would say, 18 months.
A year and a half.
Yeah, about that.
So you're spending a year and a half writing this thing. You say you plumb the depths of your own knowledge. This is a very interesting meditation on celebrity and, you know, what we really want out of life, I think. And,
Right.
And it's based around golf, of all things.
Of all things.
Where does this... did you plumb the depths of your own...
As I always do. And I have played golf for a good part of my life. I don't play it often, but I've played it since I was 12 years old. And
12 years old? You've been playing... Oh,
yes,
wow.
that
Okay.
long. So I took it in grade 8. Boys golf was one of the options. We could take boys cooking, I did that, and boys golf were the two options I took in grade 8. And I was using my grandmother's old clubs. I think they were wooden shafted. That's how old they were. And I took a liking to the game. And I don't get to play very often, but you know, a handful of times a year I play. But when you played a lot in your earlier part of your life, your swing is kind of there.
Yes, yes.
And so I can still only play a few times a year and not embarrass myself too badly.
Okay, well, you know, there are going to be people listening to this who haven't yet dug into the book. We've talked about the golf. Can you summarize this book for people if you're to tell people, you know, just give us a little synopsis of the
Sure.
book?
It's hard to do it. I haven't got the 30-second elevator pitch. I need to work on that. The book's not even out yet, so I need to plan that. However,
I know a consultancy firm that might be able to help you, actually.
Exactly. I think of it as a novel that explores the difference between success and happiness,
Fulfillment, yeah.
and sometimes and sort of the confusion that we often feel when wrestling with those two parts of our lives. And as I am wont to do, I've chosen a particularly outlandish sort of idea to examine that, or storyline to examine that idea. And in the case of this novel, the narrator, when the novel opens, he's a 17-year-old starting his final year in high school. And he discovers, courtesy of his phys ed teacher, that he has a body that is absolutely perfectly proportioned for golf, according to the theory of an obscure Swedish kinesiologist. And not to get too deeply into the kinesiology weeds on it, he has utterly and literally no agency over his success in the game of golf.
The boy, yeah.
It is only due to the length of his arms and his legs and the width of his torso and the way his natural swing works, just because his body is so perfectly proportioned. And in fact, it is so perfect and so dependent on his natural makeup that practice makes him worse, because practice is not natural at all.
This is the Donald Trump school of thought about expending, you know, we got to save our energy. We don't expend it. If we expend all our energy, we won't have anything left.
That's right.
And then we won't be able to play golf.
That's right.
Which is near and dear to his heart, by the way, as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is it is an outlandish, almost fantastical story.
Though I hope it is explained in a way that at least approaches plausibility for the reader.
It does, on some level. It does. Is
Good,
this based
thank you,
on any? Is it based on any kinesiology, like a theory of some kind, or
No.
you just made this up?
I made it up. It's what we do as novelists.
Yes,
We just
of
cook
course.
things up. Although it's an idea that I've had for a long time, that as I look around at all of the people I know and just people I don't know walking on the street, you look at them and you think, that person's probably got a body that would work for curling or swimming.
No one thinks this, Terry. You're the
Maybe
only
not.
one thinking
I'm
this.
the only one. It may be. And the problem is, if that's true, the tragedy is that many of us never discover the sport
Right.
that we are could be a world champion in, because we just never get a chance to try high lie or something.
It's
like
a fascinating theory, an idea
Yes.
that you've conjured, that maybe we're just preordained to be great
Right.
at some sort of physical sport.
Right.
That duality between fulfillment and success, we were just talking about your duality as a writer and as someone who works in this office that we're in.
Yes.
Your protagonist is an aspiring writer.
He is.
He and his lady friend at 17 both are wannabe writers, and that's what he really wants to do. but then this thing happens where he's found out to be a great golfer. Have you seen Happy Gilmore? Have you seen that film?
I have not for a while, but I do remember
it. Occurred, weirdly enough, I was reading Albatross, and then my 7-year-old son and I were like, what are we going to watch? I'm like, and he was like, what's Happy Gilmore on Netflix?
Right.
And I said, well, it's probably not appropriate for you, but let's give it a shot. Anyway, then it was a weird thing because that's another reluctant golfer.
You're right. I hadn't thought of that connection.
So
you're right.
What is it about golf that people are either, a lot of us write it off as an elitist, sport that isn't for everyone. You've got a protagonist here who doesn't want to do it, makes millions and millions of dollars. His life's changed, but is just so grumpy about golf. Are you saying something about golf? Sorry, I wanted to ask about the duality, but then I got lost in the golf.
Okay.
But yeah, what's going on with golf, first of all?
Well, I wanted it to be an individual sport because I thought it would be too complicated to make it have him be an outstanding hockey player or something.
Sure.
I could have written about hockey because I played hockey longer than I've played golf, and I still play. But it just seemed golf was better suited for the inner turmoil that he was going to wrestle with because you're right, he doesn't like golf. He realizes he is the golden goose in a way that is providing him with golden eggs.
His teacher realizes it too.
Yes.
And he's very fond. His teacher, by the way, also quite a proficient golfer.
Quite a good golfer, she
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
She's a fun character. I enjoyed writing her.
Very interesting character, yeah.
Yeah, I liked her. I liked her a lot.
Yeah.
But the irony is he's not nearly as good a writer as he is a golfer. And, of course, in golf, he doesn't need to practice, and he's never made a mistake in golf because he's just so perfectly suited for it that he laps up all of the criticism that he gets on the stories that he writes in his creative writing class.
Right.
And so he takes the advice so genuinely and in such a welcoming way that everyone else is rather struck by that because writers don't often take criticism as willingly and gratefully and graciously, but he does.
That's how it's framed in the book, that the writers he's around are very sensitive and they don't want that feedback.
Right.
Meanwhile, his alter ego, if you will, his other life, he's just praise is hailed upon him. I mean, at the same time, anyway, I don't want to give too much away about the book, but I want to get to that duality as you're someone who works in this office that we're in, but you're also a very gifted writer. Is there something going on between this character, who is an aspiring writer, and and has a day job he doesn't really want to be doing? He wishes he could just be the writer. Do you relate to this character in that way?
Well, at the risk of my clients or my colleagues hearing this podcast...
You're in charge, so you can't get canned, I don't think,
that's
right?
True. I suppose that's true. Well, I've had a great career as a communications consultant. I have enjoyed it. And I like to think I've been reasonably successful at it. However, when I wrote my first novel was the first time it really dawned on me what it was like to love what you're doing. And I thought I loved my day job, and I've had a great career, no regrets. I wouldn't have changed a thing.
Right.
But when I wrote my first novel, I said, that's what that feeling is. And that probably was when the seed was planted for this novel. So I suppose
when you started writing, you feel like the seed was planted for this, your 7th novel?
I expect so.
Huh.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't have the idea then, but I suspect that that's when it started.
Right. I mean, this is something we can all relate to. Some of us, particularly this day and age, your hobby can be all-consuming, but not yield great success. And the other things you do that you spend the majority of your day doing to put food on the table, pay the bills, is not as fulfilling as your hobby.
Right.
So the goal that all of us have is to make the hobby the job.
Precisely.
Right.
And if perhaps I was published in other countries or had more movie deals or something, maybe that would be possible, that I could just be a writer full time. But not yet.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how you made that leap from doing this By this, I mean being in this office or wherever you were at the time, and starting this firm and saying, I have something else to express. What caused that leap to actually try to write a novel?
Right.
Because I'm sure you get this all the time. I think public speaking, writing novels, among the things that most people find completely mystifying. Mortals, regular people are like, I can't imagine having to do those things. How did you make that leap?
Well, I think it has its roots in a love of language that was engendered by my father, I think, more than anyone else. He had a great love of language and schooled us in grammar and respect and reverence for the language. And that, coupled with a growing interest in fiction, which was rather late coming to me, I didn't really start reading fiction until I was in my mid-20s.
What were you reading before that?
I was so involved in politics and that I was reading history and biography and political science and economics, if you can believe it.
Can you expand upon that? I'm somewhat aware of the fact that you were very immersed in politics. You lived in Ottawa, right?
I did for a time.
And what did you do there?
My first job was on the staff of Jean Chrétien for his 1984 leadership run. I just finished my term as president of the Students' Union at McMaster University, where I got my engineering degree that I've never used in the formal sense since, though I think I use it almost every day in how I view the world. But I was fascinated, interested, dedicated to politics, and was very active in the student movement. And I threw myself into politics. And I worked on Parliament Hill for a cabinet minister in the Turner cabinet.
Oh, wow.
The short-lived Turner cabinet.
John Turner we're talking about.
Yes.
This is going back a ways
John
for
Turner,
my
84.
international audience who might be listening. Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. John Turner, who was prime minister for a short period in the summer of 1984.
Right.
And it was a short reign because Brian Mulroney and his Conservatives swept to power on September the 4th, I think it was, 1984. But I stayed with the minister I was working for was reelected, but of course was then in opposition. So I stayed with him in opposition for a year. And when the David Peterson Liberal government came to power here in Queen's Park in 1985, I was invited to come back and work for the finance minister on his political staff, Bob Nixon.
Now, when you say work, you mentioned working for a lot of people there. What did you actually do?
I was writing speeches. I was doing policy research. I was writing letters to constituents. I was developing questions to use in question period.
With an engineering degree. This is where you went.
Correct.
That's fascinating.
That is odd, I know. But, engineering is a great preparation for politics and for many things. It really teaches a sense of discipline that is required in everything I've managed to get involved in, including writing novels and being a consultant. Discipline and just getting down to it. Because if you don't get down to your engineering assignment, it's due the next day.
Yeah, right.
There's no choice in the matter. You just do it.
Okay, so it's the workflow and management of the workflow that you feel you apply in every day.
And sort of a methodological approach to problem solving where you examine an issue, you decide what are the knowns, what are the unknowns, what is actually having influence, and what is just cosmetic and distracting us.
Right.
And how do you what levers do you move to affect the change you want? And those are all important concepts in consulting when you're developing strategy and that sort of thing. So I actually am very happy I have an engineering degree. I think it has helped me. Certainly it's helped me when I write my novels. I write novels the way you would expect an engineer to write novels. I am very much an outliner, a blueprint, a planner.
Okay, you're one of these. You're not like someone who just starts and sees where you end up.
No, I am at the extreme end of the planning spectrum.
It seems to be working out for you, if I might say. So you're in politics, and then what? What happens after? And you've written about this on some level, right? You've written thinly veiled accounts of your...
Well, it wasn't so much my experiences. There were certainly the challenges I had with politics and the problems I thought we have in our politics in this country. And those first two novels, The Best Laid Plans and The High Road, were in a way my love letters to democracy. I was trying to illuminate a different path we might take in politics. But if I had written a rage-filled nonfiction polemic on my view on the state of politics, nobody would have read it or published it. So I decided to cloak my thoughts and my angst and my concerns about politics in a funny story and put my thoughts in the minds and mouths of some characters people might come to like.
Okay.
But there is to me, there is a mission in those novels, although I think it's quite possible to read it just as a funny story and enjoy it as entertainment.
Yeah, I think they've been sort of described as kind of political satire. Is
Yes.
that how you would view them?
I think of it as satire rather than as comedy. Comedy makes you laugh. Satire makes you laugh, but it ought to make you think
and
as
angry.
well.
Sometimes it makes you angry.
Sometimes it does.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at some point you start this business?
Yeah, I went after my life in politics ended in the end of '87. I joined a multinational PR agency called Hill and Knowlton. Back, it was 1988. I started there, and I was with them for 8 years. And that experience of working in a multinational, New York-based PR agency informed my third novel, Up and Down, which is set in a multinational PR agency headquartered in New York.
Okay, so if we really want your biographical details,
just read the novels.
Read all your novels, and we'll get a glimpse
funny.
of you.
They aren't autobiographical, but they do. They are set in and deal with locations and issues and times of my life that I certainly know a lot about.
Right.
So I think any writer's goal is to write with authenticity and authority, and I find it easiest to do that if I'm writing about things that I already know.
Right. So this book, Albatross, does some interesting stuff with we were talking earlier about social media, and we live in a time of peak individualism. You have a character who would be the envy of any wannabe Instagram star or YouTube star, fame thrust upon him, and he is rejecting it on some level, and in the book eventually tries to alter himself so that he gains anonymity. Are you speaking to this? And by the way, as I recall, your book kind of leaps through time. It kind of we end up in the future at some point, don't we? Yeah. So
that's right.
Are you saying something about this modern time with this character who is given this gift of not only a skill but fame and wants nothing, in fact,
money.
and money. Yeah, he gets fame and money. That's right. And in the end, to pursue his true passion, actually seeks anonymity and actually takes a chance on letting the work he does speak for itself and have nothing to do with him as a personality.
Right.
That struck me as fascinating because we're such a personality-driven culture now.
Right.
Are you speaking to that?
Well, I think it's a bit more about the nature of celebrity than it is about social media and the digital world, although it's hard to separate those two. I totally understand that.
It creeps up. I understand the distinction you're making, but it does creep up in the book when he is sort of found out at one point, when his anonymity is shattered. It's the result of, I think, a social media post or a news report that circulates. So.
Tabloid paparazzi or...
Right.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to get at that a little bit because I found that striking, particularly for a young man who is... these days, like I say, a lot of us are, not me, I'm older, but a lot of younger people seem really to put themselves out there, want to make something of themselves. This character is conflicted about what he's made of himself, even though he's got the fame, the riches, and whisked around the world and all these things.
He is conflicted, and he's conflicted because he feels he is in no way responsible for his fame and wealth and profile. He feels like an empty vessel. It is just his body that has earned him this fame, and he would much rather be a struggling, not even mid-list, lower than mid-list writer, because that's something that came out of his head and out of his hard work. It's not just something that he can do effortlessly and win every time. So in a way, he's embarrassed by his fame, or embarrassed may not be quite the right word, but he certainly doesn't. He feels guilty about it.
He's self-conscious about it, that's for sure.
He's self-conscious about it. He's guilty that he has all of this, and he does give away quite a bit of his money because. And it isn't so much because he cares about those causes, although he does. It's more that he barely feels entitled to the money in the first place.
That's a good word to use because there is a lot of entitlement these days. I'm sorry to keep jumping back to
Jump away.
Well, what is this saying? I guess I'm curious about what this particular character, who does seem to have a moral fiber and a sense of dignity and pride. Are you making any comment on what's happening right now in terms of the way, not only the way, it's horrible to say that young people are a certain way, but I do feel like the media and the way that we're being, if I was a young person now, I would feel a bit confused about how I'm supposed to behave, what is appropriate, what isn't, what is earned, what is why do I feel entitled about certain things? Because we see that a lot too.
Yes.
So I just wondered if you were making a comment on that.
I think I was, now that you put it that way. This is what happens when people analyze your book, and they give this big, elaborate theory, and was that what you were intending? Yes, that's exactly.
Well, I know it's open to interpretation,
Yes,
but this is my reading of it.
No, I think you're right. And to me, the book is about not chasing after the wrong things, I guess, and if celebrity and fame and power and money are what people are looking for, it's possible to have that.
Right.
But you may be a hollow shell to get there. So it's to look inside yourself and discover and work at finding out what really fulfills you, what really makes you happy, and then figure out how to integrate that into the life that you have.
What about the long lost love interest here? You have a kind of high school sweethearts being pulled apart as well, and then if all goes well, they're brought back together on some level. Again, I don't want to spoil anything about the book. What were you thinking there in terms of that connection to home? Because, we leave home, we leave our parents, we go make our way in the world, and it's sometimes, if you're unfortunate maybe even, you lose that connection.
Yes.
But this protagonist is almost always connected. He feels something deep and for this high
woman,
school sweetheart. Yeah,
he does. They're very much in love, and then his world in a way explodes with golf, and he gets the full ride scholarship to Stanford, where he can study creative writing, which is really why he's going there.
Yeah, exactly.
But he joins the golf team, of course, and tears up the NCAA, and he's started his journey. But he really misses his girlfriend, his first love, and they're so simpatico on so many different levels. So in a way, it may well be I was writing a bit about the endurance of love when it's the right love.
And that's familiar. But I also thought it was striking that they connect. They're connected to each other, but I think they're also connected to a place.
Yes.
In their lives and geographically as well.
That's right. And of course, he is separated from all of that when he goes to California to study and play golf, and then playing on the tour. He's very seldom at home.
Yeah.
And that was kind of his anchor. He's an only child.
Yeah.
So I think when he does come back to Toronto, he is coming home in more ways than one.
There's a very surprising and pivotal action sequence in this book that without giving too much away, can you talk about where that came from? Just this notion of having this character who feels weirdly, he's very successful, but feels kind of rudderless, and he loses ostensibly his anchor in this world that he's entered. And in a very dramatic and strange way.
Yes.
What were you thinking with that one?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because I haven't written very many scenes like that one in my novels, and it may have been me trying to explore different parts of storytelling that I hadn't attempted before. But I also think that in all of my novels, there is this thread of, or not a thread, but there is often sadness and tragedy that is juxtaposed with the comic and the humorous, the antic. And in a way, I do that because I think that's what our lives are like. And I think it makes for a more meaningful ride for the reader when they're not just above the line chortling away, but that they're dipping below the line and are, I don't know if they'd ever have a lump in their throat, but that would be amazing if someone said to me they'd have a lump in their throat.
The action sequence I'm describing just comes to me anyway out of left field.
Right, and that was intentional.
That was the intention.
And it was a shocking event in the novel, but it was perhaps the shock that Adam, the narrator, needed.
Right.
So it was difficult to write because I'm not prone to those sorts of scenes, but it was fun to sort of work myself through it, and yeah, I hope it catches readers by surprise. Now that we've talked about it, maybe it won't.
No, I think it will. I don't think we've divulged too much.
No, we haven't. I haven't.
I think it will be. It's a shock.
Yeah. So it was it was an interesting process for me to go through that, but I wanted something that was significant enough to knock some sense and some gumption in a way, and some direction perhaps into our narrator.
Knock him out of his complacency a little bit. Yeah. You speak of Adam and the fact that he is the narrator. You have someone in your book who is an aspiring writer telling us his story. And the whole time I'm like, I thought by the end we will have discovered that this was his new book. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, I see. Yes.
Yeah, yes. I was like, oh, he's the guy that wants to be a good writer is telling me his story. So,
and then he would say at the end, "And this is the book."
Yeah, something like that.
I've done that already.
Is that right?
I did that in my fourth novel.
Okay,
I did that.
That's it. You have a penchant for the first-person narrator to suddenly.
I do.
Okay.
I have. It's perhaps fear on my part, but I feel really comfortable in writing in the first person.
Yeah.
It has its limitations, as you know. If you're not in the room at the time, you can't describe anything else that's going on. So sometimes there are some gymnastics that are required to share other parts of the story that maybe the narrator doesn't know, and there are some techniques you can do with that. But I've always written in the first person. Should I try something else? Probably. Just to,
is every novel in the first person? I'm just asking. Is that right?
Every novel, and it's. I think it's partly because my tendency is to write in a voice that is similar to my own voice.
Well, you say that you've said a few times, I think, during our conversation, that you do plumb your own experience for what goes on in your stories. Let's flip that. Do you see these characters as... I know they're fantastical. I know that even for you as the creator, there's some level of escapism in writing them.
Sure.
Is it sort of like, man, I wish I was like so-and-so. I wish I could do that. Do you have that a little bit? Once you've created characters?
I probably do. Certainly some of the characters are aspirational characters. My Angus McClintock character in the first two novels, who is the accidental member of Parliament, who is so honest and committed to his principles and the public interest, and he's just this, he's too good to be true. And I aspire to be in a way like him, and I hope other politicians might do that too. Yeah. So some of them are aspirational. Some of them are. I mean, in my third novel, I have a a 71-year-old bush pilot, lesbian doctor in a frozen lake in BC, and she ends up in space. And
That sounds like you. This sounds exactly like you.
I've always wanted to. I'm a big space nut, so it was not unusual that I would write about that at some point.
Right.
So the desire or the choice to write about that, I think, reflects my interest and perhaps a desire one day that maybe I'll get to go to space. So yeah, they're personal storylines in a way, but they are not autobiographical. If you get that distinction,
I do get the distinction, but I will say the only other thing that occurs to me in terms of potential layers in Albatross, I wonder if you're a sportsman. Clearly, you say you've been playing golf since grade 8. Hockey, you've played more than golf. Any other sports, by the way? Are those the main ones?
Played competitive badminton. Not for a while now, but I still play with my brother on Monday nights.
Okay. So you're a sports guy.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Is there anything going on with Adam within this story that speaks to how we maybe overvalue these athletes, maybe think they're more special than they are, or maybe they're overcompensated? I wondered about that.
Excellent. Very good point. Yes, I think so. I think so.
You say this as a fan and an appreciator of the sports.
Absolutely. And as a writer, and writers, particularly writers of novels in Canada, I mean, our very best novelists, for their writing alone, don't come close to the salary that Mitch Marner is going to be paid for his first game next season.
Exactly.
Right?
It's a big problem that I don't understand. I
Right.
mean, our teachers, our professors, our doctors, our scientists, you would think they would be compensated on those levels.
Yes.
Just for their work that they're doing.
It is difficult, and it's no coincidence that
And our writers, I should say, and our writers.
Of course. Well, that's why I juxtaposed
Yes.
the lowly writer
Yeah.
and the wealthiest, most famous golfer in the world
Right.
in this novel, because that contrast is just so stark.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a point you were highlighting.
I may have been making as strong a point about how writers are compensated as I was about how athletes are. It comes at it from both sides. I
It's
think.
true. I mean, for people who know how literary culture in this country anyway works, and it's probably a similar model elsewhere, this juxtaposition of Adam, the professional golfer, with Adam, the anonymous writer on a very, very small independent publishing,
Right.
in a publishing house, is fascinating.
In a book that isn't flying off the shelves.
Exactly, because no one knows the writer, and no
Right.
one cares. And then,
Right.
Anyway, very fascinating. I just think there's many levels and layers to this book, and I enjoyed it.
I'm glad. Thank you.
And it does, you mentioned film deals. I end up saying this to writers on the show sometimes. This one feels like it could be something I watch. Like, this feels like it has the elements to be it's realistic and fantastical enough that you could see it.
Put it on. Yeah. I don't think about that when I'm writing it, but at the end it occurred to me as well. I mean, I was so lucky. My first novel was a CBC miniseries,
Right?
And the director, the producer-director, asked if I'd ever written screenplays before. I said no, I wouldn't know how to do that. And he goes, "Well, your novels read kind of like a screenplay."
Exactly.
And I don't know whether that's the first-person narrative that helps make that feel that way. But.
No, I perhaps it's that. I think it's the details are vivid and the characters come through quickly. Like, I get a sense of them right away. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know. I don't want to overflatter you.
Yeah, thank you.
But I enjoyed this book. So what's next for you? You mentioned 18 months spent on Albatross. Do you have something else brewing at this point, or is it too early?
I do. I do have something else brewing. It's nowhere near the writing stage or even the outlining stage. I'm in the plotting, mapping out stage, but it's quite possible that we may see a return of Angus McClintock from my first two novels.
Okay.
It's a question I'm asked at every book talk I have ever given in the last 10 years.
People like
is Angus coming back.
People like the character, but people also like the continuity of a series.
Yes, although it'll be a little bit different. He will be a politician, but he'll be a cabinet minister. But it's not about politics. It's about sort of a international. Think of it as an international thriller of sorts that he and his sidekick stumble into.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay,
so a comic thriller may be what I'm trying next.
Okay,
so we'll see how it goes.
So where can people learn more about that? Thank you for that. That was fascinating. Most times, particularly with writers,
no one talks about what they're
writing.
writing.
They're like, I got a thing, but I don't know if it's
right.
there
Yeah.
yet. I don't want to talk about it yet. You were like, you started that way, and then you're like, actually,
well, it is in its nascent form right now, so
yes.
I'm hoping it will emerge the way I've described it.
Right.
But we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
No, that's excellent. Thank you for that. Where can people go to learn on the internet, of course? Where can they go to learn more about Albatross and about you?
I have a website, terryfallis.com. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. You can, if you search me up there, you'll find me. Terry Fallis Author, I think, is what it is on Facebook. I have 2 Facebook pages.
Yeah.
Looking forward to Albatross hitting bookshelves.
And you're going to be doing like festivals and whatnot?
Yes, yeah.
I know you're coming to the Eden Mills Writers Festival.
I
Is that
am.
the plan? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, you've been there before.
A few
Any other?
times.
Are you going to travel?
I'm out to the Sunshine Coast Writers Festival in August. I'm at the Ottawa Writers Festival. I am. There are several other festivals. Calgary WordFest I'm going to, and several others. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I know these are happenings. I know people. You obviously partake in these things. Do you have like a pros and cons about this kind of experience, the writers' festivals? I'm just curious. I just wonder if because I watch writers reading, and I don't know why. I can't imagine myself doing. I can imagine myself doing all sorts of things. I can imagine myself interviewing that writer on stage and being completely comfortable. There's just something about reading it. I wonder what it's like. I wonder what that experience must be like.
Well, for me, there are only pros. I actually really enjoy the festivals. I know some writers. Perhaps they are writers because they don't necessarily like to be
speaking in public.
It's not perhaps a natural thing for them. But for me, it's a reward for having sequestered myself for 18 months and churned out this book. Then I can go and talk about it and meet people. And
is the writers' community as closely knit as you would like it to be?
It is to me.
Yeah.
I've come to know so many wonderful writers who I have watched from afar and read and collected and revered over the years, and I get to be in the author's lounge with them and talk to them, and it's really one of the few times writers get a chance to get together, because when else do they get together?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
So I actually quite enjoy it, and the chance to meet readers who have actually read your book. I mean, that is very rewarding.
Absolutely.
Particularly if they've enjoyed the book. If they haven't, it's less rewarding. But I actually quite like it, and I think it's also, in a way, it's part of being a writer in this country. If you want to sell enough books to write another one, is that you can't simply put it on the shelf in your local independent bookstore and wait for the royalty check to arrive, because there will be no royalty check if that's how it unfolds. Right.
You got to go on tour. It's like a band who has to go on tour and sell the record.
In a way, it is. And then you sell enough, and you're also building a constituency out there in places that you don't travel very often, and you build up pockets of support, you hope, and that when your next book comes out, they will say, oh, he came to my book club.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to pick that one up.
Right.
So I think it is part of a continuum of the writer's life that I actually enjoy all parts of it. Lots of writers don't enjoy all parts of it. Some writers don't enjoy the writing part even. But I really enjoy almost every aspect of the life.
It's great to hear.
I feel very lucky.
I appreciate that. Well, Terry, if I might say, you're something of a Renaissance man as far as I'm concerned. You do it all, and I thank you for this time and for being on the show, and best of luck with Albatross and everything else going forward.
Vish, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All my gratitude to Terry Fallis for being on this, the 490th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and available on all iOS and Android platforms and everything you use to access podcasts, and even other media. Spotify, YouTube, Audio Boom, Creative Control is there. If you can't find an episode that you're looking for, that you've heard about, for some reason it's not on any of those things, or if you want to learn more about me and sign up for my regularly scheduled newsletter, please visit my website, vishkhanna.com. Everything you need to know is there. You can like Creative Control on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at VishCreative, or follow me at Vishkhanna. Listen to a radio show version of Creative Control on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time, around the world at CFRU.ca, or on an actual radio at 93.3 FM if you're in or near Guelph. Also, please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going. It is a very modest Patreon, and we could use more donations. So please, patreon.com/Creative Control if you enjoy this show. Thanks again to Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, Planet Bean Coffee, and Grandad's Donuts for their in-kind support for this show. Thanks as always to my old friend Jim Guthrie for letting me use some of his music on this program. You can learn more about Jim at jimguthrie.org. And finally, you. Thank you very much for listening to this episode and subscribing to the podcast if that's what you're going to do or do already. And spreading the word about the show to your friends, your family, people who might be interested in it. That always helps. So thank you for that. I must leave you. I will talk to you soon. Bye for now.